What's up everyone, I'm B the Installer. I'm here to go over the best OLED TVs in 2024, which ones that I think you should consider for buying. I'm gonna go over all the ones that you see on the screen here. And at the end, not only am I gonna base these on which I think are the best, but I'm actually gonna go through each tier and show you which one that I'd buy based on the price. And after that, I'm even gonna show you a couple LED TVs that I would consider if you're like, I really still don't like OLED TVs. I'm just here to look at this, but I'm gonna buy an LED TV. I have two TVs for you. They're really awesome. And before I get too far into this, remember all the links will be down in the description if you're looking to buy any of these TVs. It does support the channel, but has no impact on which one of these TVs I actually recommend. I'm just giving you guys the info. Feel free to buy them if you'd like. So let's get into this. The first one is the LG C4, okay? The C-series TVs are always really, really good. You're talking about top 5 TVs ever made on the planet, and it's $1699 for a 65-inch, and for a 77-inch, it's $2,600 or less. I always talk about how just a few years ago, there were some really nice 77-inch TVs that were $3,500, and that's when they were on Black Friday sales price. So, you know, $1,000 less, more competition. I know having QD OLEDs in the mix has helped bring all the prices of OLED TVs down, but I'm a big fan of LG C4, C3, all of these because they're just really, really good year over year, really cool looking TVs, nice pedestal stand in the middle, hang them on the wall, they look awesome, and you're immediately gonna have the best TV out of any of your friends. So for me, the C4 has to be on this A tier at least, if not the S tier, but I'm gonna put it right here for now just because I know we have a couple of more expensive OLEDs that technically are better, and we'll talk about that in a minute, but you know, it's gonna be really hard for this not to be the very best A tier TV. Now, if you want to save a little money, you can go back and look at last year's C3, which is $2,200 for a 77-inch. It's basically like the only size, I think, that is available on Best Buy's website. You know, if you get them at any store, Costco or whatever, go for it. I mean, I'm not pitching this on behalf of Best Buy, this video. It's just using it for, you know, so you guys can see what's going on with the prices and everything. And if you compare that to the 77-inch C4, you're going to save about $400. So is it worth it to get last year's for a savings of about 20%? That's on you guys to figure out, but you know, more or less is going to be very similar. I think the C4 being that it's a little bit newer, I'd probably just go for it, spend a little bit more, but you know, $400 is enough to buy like a new sound system or something. So obviously it's an opportunity for you to save a little money. So yes, the C3 is still an A tier TV, even though you save that 20%. So great opportunity there. Now, if you really want to save a little bit more money, the B4 OLED is probably a great opportunity too, because it's not going to be lacking a whole lot. Now, it's going to have a little bit different processor. It probably only has 2 of the HDMI ports that have 4K at 120, but again, not a huge deal breaker for me, more or less. I'm just trying to figure out if it's going to be a nice OLED TV. It's got that same cool profile that I like about the C4. So if you're newer to the OLED game, or you're just saying, you know, it's a little bit more expensive to buy that C4, I guess it's only $200 more, then you can get the B4. But if you compare this to last year's C3, if you could get it at 65-inch, it's $100 less for the C3. So I'd probably take the C3 over the B4, but we're just splitting hairs. And so I'm gonna put this B4 on the B tier because it's obviously just below the C4, but I don't know if there's a whole lot of OLEDs that are gonna be down in the C and D anyways. But yes, it's still a very awesome OLED TV, gonna have great viewing angles, it's gonna be fairly bright, great specular highlights, all the things that you love from an OLED, and you're gonna save a little bit of money. Now, if you're gonna go for the best LG, you're gonna get the G4. The G4 OLED is absolutely fantastic. I really have nothing to complain about with it. I did a review, it was a sponsor review. People did not love that I did this sponsored, and I understand that, but sometimes we gotta pay the bills, you know what I'm saying? But hey, it's fair. I want to give you guys my opinion of the G4 right now. This TV is awesome. There's really nothing to complain about. If you're going to wall mount a TV, this is literally the best TV on the planet. It's so bright. It's fantastic with upscaling. It's fantastic for high definition, you know, HDR stuff, gaming. Just amazing. I mean, my son plays video games on this thing all the time. I have nothing to complain about it. So it's very tough for me to give you a whole lot more than that. The only thing is the price point, or maybe what you compare it to. Like, the cool thing about this is that you can get this on a stand for 65 and 55-inch. So is it worth $3,000? That's tough for me to say. I mean, if you have the money, it's pretty awesome. If you get the 77 or 83, it's wall mounted, doesn't come with the stand, but it's much more expensive too. 77-inch for $4,300 is rather expensive. So for me, G4, S tier, no question about it. Looks like a good start for LG. They got one on the S, the A, and the B. And I don't know if anything can knock these off of the first spot of each level either. Big fan of the LG TVs, the OLEDs. Obviously, everyone knows that their OLED TVs are fantastic. If they can get the QNEDs or their other LED TVs up to that status, they'd be killing it. But LG OLED TVs, awesome. Now, if you wanted to get a little bit of a deal, you could actually get the 65-inch G3 and save yourself a lot of money. So right now you're getting a 65-inch for $2,000, and if you go back to the G4, it's $2,889. So you're saving like $900 to get last year's G3. And for me, I'd tell you, you should do it, unless you need it on the stand, which the other one comes with. But I mean, you can get a stand for pretty cheap. It is not an $800 stand. So G3 from last year, loved it, still had the MLA. It was the first generation MLA. I understand it's not maybe quite as good as the second generation MLA, but this was extremely bright. It didn't have like any pink tint. I loved the G3 last year. I love the G4 this year. So price-wise, I would say go ahead and get the G3 if needed, if you want to save a little money. And so therefore, I would put the G3 up on this top tier as well. Really, really awesome TV, no question about it. Now, one TV that I had, the M3, really cool TV. I like the idea of the wireless feature on it. Game 4K 120 from a distance. If your AVR and your other stuff is like moved to the side and you need this connectivity, the wireless connectivity, pretty awesome. Now, the only downside is very expensive and it doesn't have the MLA on the M3. So for me, I wasn't as thrilled with it. And for me, I would probably have to put it on this B tier. Well, I mean, it's probably on the A tier with regards to its quality, but because of the price, I'd probably put it on the B. And then, you know, it isn't better than the G4. So, you know, would I really get this? Probably not, unless you really need that wireless connectivity. So that's all for LG for now. We're going to talk more about where they rank compared to the other ones in a second. So now we have Samsung. Now I started with the S90D because this is a very popular model, not because it's the brightest or the best ever, but because of the price point. So again, this is a third generation QD OLED now. It has the 4K 120 ports on all four, and it's much less expensive than the step up in the S95D. So this is a big time winner for Samsung. Last year, the S90C here also was a big time winner. So yes, I'm gonna put the S90D up here on this tier list, and it's gotta go right next to the C4 here. We're gonna have to differentiate between these two in just a second, but really awesome TV. And while I'm at it, we're gonna just have to put the S90C up there too, because if you wanna save a little bit of money, right now you can get the new S90D for $1699, and if you wanna get the S90C, you can save $200. So you're talking about 15% or so on savings there, but you can't get the 77-inch model. So it's just one of those things that if you want to get a 65-inch TV, you know, you have two options there for the mid or, you know, second highest Samsung QD OLED ever made. Really awesome. And I think either one of these will do you really well. Really cool TVs. And if you want to go a step down from that, you still have the S85D. Now, this one is a W OLED, so it's not a QD OLED, and that's why it's a little bit less expensive. Going to save a couple $100, but it's the same price as this S90C. So again, we have the same problem we had with the LG. Would I go two steps down to get the new D series, 85D, meaning the third level of the Samsung, or would I go last year and get the second level? I'd probably get a 65-inch of the S90C over this S85D. But the cool thing is you can get actually a 77-inch version of this for $2,300, which is right in line with this B4 77-inch. And I would just have to bet that the S85D would be brighter than the B4 and maybe have a slight advantage from the W OLED perspective. But I still would have to put this on the B tier, really, really high and really close to this A tier, but still great options so far on the OLED TVs. And of course, if you want the best of the best from Samsung, you have the S95D. I had this in the house, absolutely love it. Really remarkable TV, looks bright, beautiful, all the things that you'd want. Games remarkably, has a pretty good OS, ties in, not my favorite operating system, but it's doable. It does work great with like Samsung products. If you have a Samsung phone, you know, watch, ring, all these things that I have, they kind of sync up nicely. You can like go up there with your phone and tap it and get everything to work. Now, the only issue is it has this matte-like finish. So you either love it or you don't. I happen to love it. I'm in rooms that are not like super bright, and sometimes I just don't like seeing some of the small lights in the background, you know, especially at night if you're trying to watch a movie and you got like, you know, the ceiling lights that are just sitting there and you can see all of them in the background in a dark scene. Not my favorite thing. So this TV takes care of that. It's got that matte-like finish. I do think it's an advantage. ratings and some of the other reviewers may not love it, or it may not be as good when it comes to like bright lights in the room, but overall I think it's pretty good. Now, $3,000 for a 65-inch, pretty hefty price. And if you go to 77-inch, $4,400. So really expensive, but that's not what we're doing right now. Right now we're doing S95D, going to be up here on this top S tier. So it's looking pretty good at the top end, and that's why OLED TVs are so popular, is because it's really hard to find a ton of flaws in these, especially now that they're so bright. Now, if you want to save some money, and also if you don't like that matte-like finish, look, we still have the S95C here, 65-inch, 77-inch available, and that's great for you because look, 77-inch is $3,000. It's still lower price than I talked about a few years ago when some of those really high-end Sony Master Series OLEDs were like $3,500 at Black Friday. We're at the end of the summer here, beginning of the fall, and you already have a better price on a 77-inch S95C OLED. You can get that in the 77-inch or the 65-inch. This has the second generation QD OLED panel, so it's kind of like pick your poison here. Do you either want last year's to save some money and get that glossy like finish that most people prefer, or do you want to go with the newer one, a little bit brighter, a little bit better, but it has that matte like finish? I mean, that's your choice. You got to figure that out. But I still would definitely put the S95C on this top tier, and it would probably be right behind that S95D just because that's newer. So again, very top heavy, looking good so far, and we got to move on. So I have not had the Sony Bravia 8. I'm actually looking to get that. I'm trying to get the 77-inch version of that. I'm not sure. I think they're going to have an 83-inch version as well, but that's not even listed yet. But when I get a larger size this, I will make a review of it and I will give you guys my full opinion. I did see this at a Sony event. I do like it. I know that other people have reviewed it and said it is basically the high-end Sony OLED, better than the A90J that I had a few years ago that I absolutely loved. It has a heatsink. I think it has all the high-end quality features that you'd want out of an OLED TV. It is not a QD OLED though. It is a WOLED, but still very awesome, very bright. But it's kind of those things where I hear some things, I see some things, I look on ratings, I calibrate, and I try to figure out what's going to be best for viewers. And I think obviously people that are fans of Sony are going to absolutely love this TV and are probably already loving it. So with that said, I'm going to throw it up on this A tier. I really can't. I've never seen a Sony high-end OLED TV not be at least an A tier here. I'm going to put it right between these because I like it as the top three here, and we're going to have to differentiate those in just a second. And lastly, on Sony, we have the A95L, the QD OLED 77-inch that I actually have in my bedroom. Super awesome. I love it. I have it on like 1% brightness at night because I'll never sleep if I have it any brighter. But when we watch Game of Thrones or House of Dragons or whatever the show may be, and I crank it up to full brightness and connect it to the whole Sony quads or HDA9 and anything like that, it looks and sounds amazing. Absolutely love it. Love the menu system. Love the Google TV. Love how bright it is. And the upscaling and everything is just so even. It's very crisp. So I love this TV. Very expensive TV, but there's no question that this is one of the top TVs. I'm going to put it right here for now, and I'll just let it go where it's going to go because we got to figure out which ones are the best there. But I absolutely love the A95L. Now, in order to really differentiate these top level TVs, we're going to have to look at a couple different features. So let's go into the C4 versus the Bravia 8 because those are two TVs I definitely would consider. Now, if you go to ratings.com, they show you that it's a 9.0 to an 8.9, showing that the C4 is just a little bit better. They showed that in pre-calibration, the actual Bravia 8 was not very good with regards to its pre-calibration. So if you're going to buy it out of the box, it's weird that the Sony was not as calibrated as the C series from LG. That could be something that changes between yours and theirs. That's just theirs. Now, HDR brightness is something that I definitely would look for. And they do show that the HDR brightness on the actual C4 is higher than the Bravia 8. So that's something that would probably sway me one way or the other. I would like a TV that's a little bit brighter, but at the same time, upscaling and sharpness on the Bravia 8 is actually better than the C4. So it looks like to me that you have two very close TVs here. So for me, I would say if I was a gamer, I would probably just go consistently with the C4. I know that the C4 is really good for gaming, it's really good for connectivity. I'd be very comfortable with that. And when it comes to the Bravia 8, if I was going to watch it just for movies, if I'm just using this in my home theater, or if I'm upscaling content, I would say the Bravia 8 is going to be better for processing and for upscaling and things that Sony's known for. So I would just say it's kind of a toss-up. But let's look at the actual S90D because that's another one. So here we have the S90D up against the LG C4, and it's not that surprising. They're both 9.0s. But on the native HDR gradient, there is a huge advantage for Samsung here. So it does look a little bit better when it comes from gradient, from changing of the color. So I noticed that on some of the Samsungs, they're very good at not having like color banding. So that's pretty cool. However, the low content smoothing is not very good for the Samsung. So if you're watching like TV or sports or whatever, it may not look quite as good on this S90D as it does on the C4. And then the viewing angles, I guess the viewing angles are a little bit better on a QD OLED than on a traditional OLED, but still the viewing angles on both OLED TVs are fantastic. One huge difference is Dolby Vision or no Dolby Vision. I mean, if that was the only thing that's separating you from buying one or the other, then there you go, just go with the C4. So if I had to choose between these three, I think the C4 is overall my favorite choice. Now, if I'm gaming, definitely the C4 or maybe the S90D. If I'm watching movies, probably the Bravia 8 or the C4. However, if I wanted to get one that's a little less expensive, the C4 and the S90D are both less expensive than the Bravia 8. So you'd have to spring for a little bit more money if you wanted to get that Bravia 8. It is $2,000 or $3,000 for the 77-inch. And as we said, the C4 is almost $500 less for a 77-inch and only $300 less for the 65-inch. So, you know, these are all tough choices, and I hope that helped there. But let's get to this B tier now, because these are two TVs that people could consider. They're both really good, and I think that we should just differentiate between the two. Now, I did say that the S85D had an 8.7, but there are some red flags there. Meanwhile, the B4 is an 8.9, and there aren't really any red flags on this one, all green, which is great. Let's start out with pre-calibration. Again, the Samsung's not that great for calibration. No Dolby Vision, not as good for low quality content smoothing, not as good for HDR brightness, but better off-angle viewing. But this is also a traditional OLED, so it's not a QD OLED. So I guess I was wrong to a degree to say that the S85D is what I would choose there. I think I would just leave the B4 right where it is and choose that based on what I just saw in the numbers. And at 77-inch, both of them are the exact same price. They're both $22.99, so you're really in a good spot either way. I think they're both really nice TVs. And for this being B tier, these are really, really nice TVs. And last on this is the S tier TVs. Now, the A95L has won 2 years in a row for King of TVs, right? So it should be no question it's the best, right? I have to say I'm not certain about that. Let's talk about this versus the G4. So overall, 9.2 versus 9.2, very close, very similar. However, if you try to split hairs and you really try to get down to the nitty gritty on this, you don't see a ton of differences. The HDR native gradient, slightly better on the A95L. Upscaling, sharpness, quality, better on the Sony. Low content smoothing, better on the LG. So it's really difficult for me to tell you which of these TVs I would choose. I would have to say it comes down to it this way. For me, if I wanted something to look really good on the wall, I would get the G4. I have nothing bad to say about the G4 at all. It's an awesome TV. Even though it's a W OLED, which some people might say is inferior to the QD OLEDs, I don't think so. With the MLA technology, it's awesome. It looks so bright and so sharp. LG did a fantastic job with the G4. If I was gonna put it on a stand, or if I was in the Sony ecosystem or like the Google TV operating system, which I do, then the A95L is the king of TVs for a reason. Really awesome. Fantastic for upscaling. When I can have it on bright, I do. It looks awesome. It's so nice. But I don't see a ton of benefit over the G4. It's very similar. And if you look at the prices here, you got $4,300 for the G4 and $5,000 for the A95L, which technically is now a year old. So you're saving 15 to 20% on the G4. I don't really have a good reason to move the A95L above it. I think that they're equal. I think you could put either one of them in that top spot, but we do need to see about the S95D. So let's take S95D versus the G4, for example. If you slide down here, you see the 9.2 for the G4, but the S95D only has a 9. Again, it has a problem with the pre-calibration, which isn't terrible to be honest. That low quality content smoothing of Samsung does not get very high marks. And the reflection is definitely less than the reflection of an OLED TV. That G4 has the best anti-reflective coating I've ever seen on a TV. In fact, if we break it open, you can see right there that that is the highest I've ever seen and you got this one that's down further with some of the LED TVs. It's not even with the typical OLED TV. So apparently that matte finish doesn't do well with the big reflections like people have said, but it's still really awesome. And again, no Dolby Vision for Samsung, so if you're really talking top tier and you're trying to find small differences, I think the S95D is right where it should be, probably right behind the G4 and the A95L, whichever order you want to put those in. And the price point is right on par with the G4 itself, so they're both a little less expensive than the A95L, although for me, if I was to choose between the S95D and the A95L, I'd spring with a little bit more cash for the A95L. And then the G3 and the S95C, I think are good right there where they're at. So now that we've gone through all the OLED TVs, I do want to give you two alternatives to OLED TVs that I think are worth mentioning. One of them is the Q6 by TCL in the 85-inch and 98-inch size. The reason I want to mention this is because this TV is really awesome for how big it is. 85 inches right here for $1,100 is really difficult to beat. It's not going to look like an OLED TV, of course, but the reason I like it is because it has 4K 120 gaming, it looks really smooth, it has a Google TV operating system, and if you're just watching sports or movies or whatever, this thing is awesome for how big it is. $1,100 for 85 inch, and if you're going to a 98 inch, you're going to get it for 2,000 bucks. Literally, I don't think any of these TVs at 77 inch or larger was anywhere near this price point at 98 inch. So I'm just mentioning it because I didn't have any TCL TVs to mention in here. They don't make OLEDs, no problem, right? And I'm not trying to sell you. I'm saying this is really good for the price point. 98 inch for $2,000. If you're definitely not going to get an OLED, I would consider this. And the other brand that I talk about a lot is Hisense. Again, I don't have any OLEDs to talk about, but I was very impressed with the U8N. So I had the 75-inch version of this for $1,400. And again, none of those 77-inch OLEDs are anywhere close to this. And to be honest, this Hisense 75-inch is amazing. It has really good off-angle viewing because it's an ADS panel. So it's kind of got that OLED-like off-angle viewing, but it's still way less expensive, a lot brighter than most of those OLED TVs. And again, Google TV operating system, gaming specs, all the stuff that you'd want. So I had to mention these two because they are a couple of the best LED and mini LED TVs for the price. Now this is only a 75-inch and $1,400. Where you can get an 85-inch version of this Q6. Now this Q6 is direct lit, but it still has decent contrast and really good brightness for a TV that's $1,100. I mean, it's really tough to beat that price point. So I hope all of this helped. Remember, again, the links are in the description if you're looking to buy any of these TVs, and that does support the channel, but it has nothing to do with which ones I've recommended. Honestly, you could buy anything. I don't really care. I'm just trying to help you guys out. I hope this has helped. Make sure to smash the like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Helps me put out a lot of this content, and I'll see you guys on the next one.